Thanks. Thanks very much, Jill, and good morning, everyone. We're truly honored and privileged this morning to have a very special guest and cancer survivor with us to share her story. As you heard, her name is Eva, and she's here with her husband, Dwight, and I know you'll be inspired by her story of hope and also perseverance. So without further delay, please welcome Eva. So Eva, good morning, and thank you so much for joining us here at Roche Tissue Diagnostics and to Tucson.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Of course. And I usually don't start interviews with an apology, but I think it's appropriate in this case because when we were with Eva on the phone, we were bragging about the beautiful weather in the fall in Tucson. Eva's from the Northwest, and we let you down.
No.
It's cold, it's rainy, and it's windy. So believe us that the weather is really nice here. You have to come back and see it.
Well, there's another way to look at this. I'm from the Northwest, so maybe I brought the rain.
Oh, well, no. That's nice of you to try to throw yourself under the bus, but we'll take ownership of it. So I understand yesterday you had a chance to visit with us on campus and tour the manufacturing facility as well as our product showcase. What do you think?
Well, it's impressive, to say the least. And I was loaded down with information. So I will not try to pass myself off as an expert after one try. But what I thought was, what a lot of energy, time, and money has gone into this research. And look at where you are today versus, a few years ago. It's progress, it's moving forward. And that's what I thought. Now, I also, was impressed with Dr. Grogan.
Yeah, who's right here.
With Dr. Grogan's initial drawings, and to see that they are actually still being used. That concept, that idea of the carousel, the birthday cake, is still today being used, except on a larger scale.
Well, even though you don't want to be called an expert, I'm going to call you an expert, because that's really impressive that you took all that away from a 1-hour tour through our facility. So well done, Eva. So Jill gave us a little preview, but let's have everyone learn about you and your family. We have some photos here, so please tell us about yourself and your interesting life and your family.
Well, I usually start off by telling my age, and I told Jill that I didn't think I'd do that anymore. She says she thinks of it in terms of wisdom, so I have 72 years of wisdom. I am married. I don't know what's happening with my voice. I am married for 49 years. So obviously I was a baby and he robbed the cradle. And we have one daughter, Andrea, who is a comedian and producer in LA.
And this is her in the photo on the left here?
Yes, that's my beautiful daughter. And in that corner on the right, at the bottom, is my mother. And I just saw her, about 6 months ago. She lives in San Francisco in Laguna Honda, which is a place for people with lost memories. So I always enjoy going to see her. Fortunately for us, she lives in a very bright environment with lots of art, not unlike here where you have art all over the place. They also have art. Some of it was actually done by the patients. But it was a privilege to see her again.
You've done some very interesting things in your life. You and your husband, Dwight, who's here in the front row, you lived in Kenya for a time.
Yes. When Dwight and I got married, it was in the 70s. And we had finished college. We didn't really have a goal in terms of a job. I have to, excuse me.
It's okay.
We didn't really know what we wanted to do with our lives. So I had a friend who was born in, I should say, Kenya. And we worked side by side, and she would constantly say, okay, let's get you to Kenya. You need to teach in Kenya. We need teachers. And finally, Dwight and I talked it over, and we decided, why not? We didn't have anything else going on. So off to Kenya we went, and we stayed there for 3 years teaching. And it was an absolutely expanding experience for us. Then when we got back, I started work for an insurance company in California. And I started out as an entry level. We used to have clerks. I don't think we have clerks anymore. But when I started at that company, I started as a clerk. And I moved up in the organization. And so that when I left, I was vice president in charge of product development. When I retired in 2000, I thought that I would teach college because I had kept up my education while I was working. And I thought, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to teach college. And so I was being trained and was ready to take on my first master's class when I went to get my mammogram as part of an examination. And the mammogram showed that I had something on my breast. And I was dumbfounded. I truly thought when I walked in to get my mammogram that, it's going to be normal as usual, and God, I hate mammograms, et cetera, et cetera. Then, but I knew something wasn't right because then they asked me to stay and have an ultrasound, which I did. And they said they saw a couple of spots on my breast, and they wanted to do a biopsy. Well, of course, I said yes. I thought they were going to do the biopsy then, but I had to make an appointment to come back to do the biopsy, and that took a week. And then when the biopsy showed that I had indeed had cancer, it took another 3 weeks for them to get that information to me. So I was on pins and needles through this whole business. But what we decided to do on the doctor's advice was to have a mastectomy. They first tried a lumpectomy, but that was insufficient. So I had a mastectomy. Then I had months of chemotherapy. And then I had radiation. And it was a difficult time because of the uncertainty. You didn't know whether this was working or not. We didn't know. And finally, after I finished treatment, I was declared cancer-free. Not cancer-free, but at least in remission.
You had a number of fairly severe side effects from the chemotherapy, as I understand it.
Oh, yes, I did. I used to make this joke that, if I passed a bed, I wanted to lie in it. I was so tired all the time, and I wasn't motivated to do anything. Nausea, the usual stuff.
So it really impacted you emotionally,
Oh,
the side
definitely.
effects.
It affected all of us, my whole family, emotionally. When you get sick, especially you get a sentence like cancer, it affects the whole family. So were you going?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think you're about to go there.
Oh,
But
okay.
as you were recovering in a pretty fragile emotional state, you had a bit of an unusual revelation, and something very interesting became part of your therapy. So I think you're about to go ahead and tell
Yes,
that
that's
story.
exactly. You're a mind reader. Did you know that? It was, the revelation wasn't a huge revelation. Actually, I would sit in my yard when the sun was out. I'm from the Bay Area, so we don't get a lot of sun where I live. So when the sun was out, I would sit outside and look at magazines or whatever. But what I didn't like was my yard. I decided that yard had to go. And so as I'm going through the different magazines, I actually came across a picture that had the ideal structure for my yard, soon to be garden. And I started digging up every inch of our yard, and I laid out a new structure for a garden. An English garden, I called it. I don't even know if it was an English garden. But I did that. I put in every plant, every stone, and I think there is. There's a picture of me standing in my garden, and you might notice how heavy I am. I hesitate to say fat, but I was heavy, and I had this round face. And the reason for the round face especially was because of steroids that I was given while I was on chemotherapy, and that caused it. But I loved working in the garden. I sometimes would work in the garden without any gloves on, just to feel the earth. It was so reaffirming. It was so marvelous to feel and to put in plants, watch them grow, put in stones and watch them become a part of the garden. So that was my fun part. Then life rolled on, for 5 years. After that 5-year mark, I thought, hey, I have done it. I have finished with cancer. Well, after we moved in retirement to Oregon, I discovered cancer wasn't finished with me. And I found that out because when I would try to breathe, I couldn't get a good breath. When I was walking across a parking lot, I'd have to rest. And we have in Oregon, some of you may know of it, is Ashland, Oregon has a Shakespeare Festival. And we go to the Shakespeare Festival every year. Well, in order to get to some of the theaters, you have to go up a hill. And I was walking with a woman who was at least 10 years older than I. And she's tearing up this hill. And I can't make it. I said, hey, I've got to stop and get my breath here. And then that's when it really hit me that maybe it's not asthma that I thought it was. Maybe it's something else. Anyway, so I went to my doctor, who thought it might be a heart problem, in fact, and sent me to a cardiologist. The cardiologist noticed that an x-ray had been ordered for me, but I hadn't taken the x-ray. And so he sent me downstairs to have the x-ray done. And when the technician came out, said, I think what we need to do is take another look. And that scared me. And then she said, you know, I think you may have a lot of fluid on your lungs. And so she sent me to a doctor that the following week aspirated about 2 liters of fluid from my lungs. And boy, that was a relief. Even though I didn't like seeing that needle, I can tell you that. But it was a relief to be able to breathe again. And that gave me some, I don't know, hope that, well, I can get through this. I can breathe, I can get through this. So eventually what they found was that I did have some spots on my lung, but not in my lung. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's what's it called?
Metastasis.
Yeah. It had metastasized.
Right, so this was the breast cancer, which was originally diagnosed in 2002.
Exactly.
And what you're describing is roughly 2014.
Exactly.
So 12 years later, it had
Right.
metastasized.
Yes. It had metastasized to not only my lungs. Once I had a CT scan done and a bone scan. They discovered that I also had it in my bones and that I had stage 4 cancer.
And at this point, I should add that Eva's cancer, and we'll show the slides in a second, was diagnosed as so-called triple-negative breast cancer, meaning that estrogen receptor, progesterone receptor, and HER2 were all negative. And maybe we can show those slides right now. So Eva, you haven't seen these slides, but these are your actual slides from this time and that recurrence.
Really?
And what's very interesting is when we requested the slides, we see that these are Ventana IHC slides. So whether you knew it or not, Roche Tissue Diagnostics Ventana products were used to diagnose your cancer at this time in the story.
Yes, and that's amazing. That is, that I can be here today looking at these slides that this company developed. When I was told that I had stage 4 breast cancer, I did not know I had triple-negative breast cancer. All I knew was that I was negative for every kind of treatment that you would normally get. And I did not know how long I had to live. I didn't find out about that until my doctor told me after I had passed the mark. And people with triple-negative breast cancer have a life expectancy of 18 months. And what happened in terms of treatment is that a surgeon went in, aspirated more fluid, removed as much cancer as he could, and then sent me back to my oncologist. My oncologist, being a smart woman, said, you know what? It's not over. There is a clinical trial that's starting up. would you like to be a part of that trial?
And that ended up being one of the very early atezolizumab Tecentriq trials in combination with Abraxane.
That's correct. And she put me in touch with the oncologist who was running the trial. And we've become pals since then. But gosh, I was going every week for 3.5 years to get the combination of the drugs, the chemotherapy,
yeah.
and the Tecentriq.
Right.
Right. And I started getting better after a few months. I mean, I could breathe. That's my criteria right there. I could breathe. And I started getting stronger. And so eventually, we passed the mark of 4 years. And I thought, okay, this is pretty good. This is pretty good. But I got stronger, and I could do things, and I could walk my dog, which really kept me in shape. And the important thing that I learned, and am still learning, is that exercise is important. If you have cancer or have been diagnosed, the best thing you can do for yourself is to walk. Sounds simple, but it's not, because you're tired and you don't feel like getting up. But if you have a dog,
That's wonderful.
if
The
you
power
have
of dog.
It's the power of dog.
So Eva, how are you feeling today? I understand you continue to receive Tecentriq and Abraxane, but how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing really good. There are some side effects. Because of the Abraxane, I'm not making enough red blood cells, which is causing anemia.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have iron deficiency anemia. I also developed last winter a condition that's called
Lymphedema.
lymphedema, thank you, lymphedema. And that means that this whole arm from the shoulder all the way down to my fingers were swollen to almost twice the size. So I have to work on that daily. I have to have at least an hour of treatment where I have a compression sock or sleeve rather on this arm, and that works. I also have a mobile sleeve so that when I fly or just sitting around at the house, I put the sleeve on. And that has helped tremendously. My fingers now are practically the same size as my right hand. My wrists are smaller. And you can tell it's moving up because now this is still. So I'm working on this one. And I'm going to get it.
I'm sure you will. I have no doubt. So that's wonderful that you're doing so well. I understand, and it would be great for you to share with everyone, you've decided as a result of this entire experience that you're going to be an advocate for cancer patients and for cancer research and pharma research. And you've, I understand, been very active and done some things with the American Association for Cancer Research?
Yes. Actually, when I was interviewed by the local newspaper and by the local news stations, suddenly a switch went off in my head, and I go, I can do more. I can do more. I can help others. And the important thing I decided, my 2 goals were give information, and that gives hope. Just those 2 things, information. when we went to Washington, I mean, my husband and I, we went to Washington as part of a rally to put a bug in the ear of our senators that we cannot do this without money. Hard work is good, but we need money to make things progress. And I was able to talk directly to a senator, one of our senators in Oregon. I was able to talk to, although I couldn't talk to the representative, I spoke to some really outstanding aides who were going to move my message forward. And I'm very proud of that. Also, I said, okay, I can do more. And so I am working with setting up, I won't even mention my work with the Instagram because let me tell you, I really admire you guys with all of the tech knowledge and I appreciate it, but I'm not one of you. So I've been challenged by Instagram, but I know I'll get some help from my husband, who is a techie, and he'll help me do that. And the purpose of it is to reach out to other organizations who already exist in their fight against cancer. And triple negative breast cancer affects the African American population out of proportion to the general population. Information has to get out there. I was first diagnosed with cancer the first time with a mammogram. And now people are being told not to get mammograms. That's insane. You have to get a mammogram. Because I had just had, before the mammogram, I had just had a physical examination. And my doctor and I were congratulating ourselves on how great I was doing. So I have an extremely aggressive form of cancer. That's what it comes down to. Triple negative breast cancer is one of the cancers that was lethal until the Tecentriq and the combination of Tecentriq with the Abraxane.
Well, Eva, thank you so much for being here. You're truly an inspiration, and we all admire your courage and your tenacity. Thank you for everything that you're doing in the cancer advocacy world to fight for NIH and NCI funding and being a proponent of pharma research. We're thrilled that you're doing so well. Perhaps as a parting message to the employees of Roche, and especially Roche Tissue Diagnostics and Roche Molecular Solutions, what message do you have to all the employees who are working so hard to create tests like you see here that were used in your case to make cancer diagnosis and cancer care better?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I would not be alive if you had not done your job, and your predecessors and the ones that go before them, because we all stand on somebody's shoulders. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I have no doubt that you will continue to make extraordinary progress in this, because I have seen such dedication in this company. I know you will continue to make progress.
Well, thank you, Eva. You're amazing. Well done.
Thank you.